Airplane pilots of Reddit, what was your biggest weird beep moment that you survived and your passengers didn't notice? If you enjoy this video, consider giving it a like and subscribing. Mine is from many years ago when I was a student pilot. I was 14 I think at the time. I had about 15 hours done and getting close to soloing for the first time, but still had a few hours and more landings to practice. I was doing some basics and getting ready to come back with my instructor to practice some touch and goes for a bit. Coming back through we had to pass through DTW's Bravo airspace, means need permission to go through it. A few minutes before I was about to call for permission, my instructor got really quiet. I looked over at him and he looked really bad. I thought he was going to puke, so looking for a bag. But then I notice he isn't breathing. I figure out where I'm at and call up DTW approach. Declare a medical emergency and that my instructor was not breathing. I also told them I'm a student and never landed on my own before and never in a large airport. Detroit approach was amazing at helping me. They gave me an option for DTW or Willow, but Willow would have added a good 5 to 10 minutes since I was coming in from the SE. Opted for DTW, and they were great at giving me vectors while also getting the big jets out of the way. I remember hearing them tell several planes to go around and several more into a hold. Anyway, did my approach and made the most butter smooth landing I have ever made in my life. Even till this day. Ambulance was right there on the taxi waiting for me. Turns out my instructor, who was only 25, had a heart attack. He ended up being okay. All in all, from first call to him in the ambulance was less than 10 minutes thanks to ATC and DTW Tower. I'm a CFI at this point, and I'm flying with a student. We see a spider in the cockpit. I'm okay with spiders, but I don't want it distracting the student, so I mash it. Student missed the spider, but saw my movement and asked what it was. I responded it was a spider. I killed it as I'm glancing into the backseat area. I managed to casually add, "Why, are you scared of spiders?" without the student noticing the break in the sentence. Turns out the student is scared of spiders. For the rest of that flight I squished spiders behind my student's back as they came forward from the nest I had just spotted in the back of the plane. He never knew. I was in the process of getting my PPL, private pilot license, and I was flying circuits solo. Before I took off, the CFO of the flight school asked me if I was sure it was a good idea to fly. It's pretty windy. I was flying a Cessna 152 on a day with wind pushing 15 kts and turbulence around 20. I honestly don't know what I or anyone at the flight school was thinking letting me, 16 years old, take off. Anyways, a few bumpy circuits go by with no problem. I actually got some great practice landing in turbulence. So the last circuit of the day, I'm on final with full flaps doing the absolute minimum speed for approach in a 152, not taking into consideration that the air is super turbulent. For those who don't know, when it's bumpy you should be going a little faster on approach than usual. Anyways, I'm quite close to the ground, maybe 300 to 400 feet, and I can hear the wind blowing over the sound of the engine. Suddenly, no wind. I had just lost 15 to 20 knots of almost direct headwind on final approach with absolutely no airspeed to spare. I remember my shirt sleeves looked like they were inflating, and the plane stall warning started screaming at me. The controls became totally useless, like a limp computer joystick. Thankfully I had my hand on the throttle like my instructor taught me, and for whatever instinctual reason, good instructor probably, I gently pushed the throttle all the way and slightly lowered the nose. All of this took place in the span of about 5 seconds. I remember what I did, but not thinking about doing it. It was like when you drive somewhere and you suddenly realize you've arrived without remembering driving. Damn scary. Anyways, I landed the plane just fine and went home and took a nap. My parents said I was pale as a ghost when I got home. Flying is fun until it isn't. Similar story to you. I'm a relatively new student pilot, and I was just starting to practice pattern work by myself, but my instructor either wanted me to go up with him for a few laps before soloing, or with another instructor if he had other students. So, my instructor has another student he's teaching. I end up going up with another instructor, just to verify that little 10 hours me can still fly a plane, before I practice for an hour or two. We take off, and as I'm on final for our last practice run, it's a little shaky as it is usually in the mid-afternoon in Florida, but I'm confident in my ability to land the plane. Well, to my surprise, when I'm about maybe 100 feet above the runway, the plane just drops in an instant, like someone took their hand and just pushed down. Luckily, my instructor must have trained me well because like you, I had my hand on the throttle and just gently pushed the power to full, leveled the nose, and made a smooth go around. Made me feel good knowing that my brain knew what to do without having to think about it much. Also, the instructor I was with I always thought seemed to look a bit angry, but I was pleasantly surprised when he smiled and complimented me on my quick decision making. Getting a compliment for doing something specifically well, other than like good job today, boosted me as a new student. It wasn't necessarily a situation where I'm thinking oh shit, we could have died, but knowing that I'm capable of recovering from a scenario as such, and not ending up like the guy who slammed a plane onto the runway and broke the gear. I still hear about the landing gear incident guy and it's been months. Was learning to fly when I worked for the governor. So on my first flight with me taking off, we've been climbing for about 5 minutes and we are going through some gentle turns when instructor says, "We're going to head back, I don't feel well." He takes over the stick, and he looks like Ash. He then starts to breathe erratically, and says I need to help him control the plane. He radios tower, and up till now I'm thinking it's a prank. Mayday mayday. He talks me through the whole thing. I'm trying to talk to the tower, repeat info, read gauges, remember lessons, listen to him, and hope he don't pass out. I was shitting myself. Takeoff is one thing, but landing? We land like a kangaroo with a rocket up its ass. I'm surprised the wheels didn't fold. Must have been 4 big bounces, but it's a big runway. Scrub speed, finally get the plane to stop, and instructor passes out. He had an heart attack. He survived but only for a few months, before I heard he passed away in his sleep, but he got us down. I never continued the lessons. This entire story occurred in less than 10 seconds, and should have ended with headlines on CNN. Military pilot and not commercial, but it still could have ended in a disaster. Flying a CH-47D Chinook helicopter in Iraq mid-July 2008, when the temp was over 130 degrees. Packed full with 36 passengers at an altitude of only 100 feet, and speed of 140 knots, lower and faster than you'd ever fly in the US. We hit a thermal pocket of warm air that pushed us up, so I nosed the cyclic, looks like a joystick between your legs, forward to maintain altitude. I was a brand new pilot flying with a combat vet who wanted me to maintain altitude of 100 feet almost exactly, so no higher than 120 or lower than 80 feet. Nosing the aircraft down kept us from going higher, but we immediately hit a downdraft and the aircraft started to fall like a rock. I pulled back on the cyclic as hard as I could to get the nose up, but it hit my body armor and wouldn't go back any further. I watched the altimeter drop all the way to 19 feet and miraculously we stopped falling and began to climb at the last possible second. During the debrief, the other pilot, now one of my closest friends, who had well over 1,000 combat hours, told me he's never been so close to dying before. I wasn't shook up until I heard that. Even typing this today gives me chills. Not a pilot but a passenger. Was on a 16-seater turboprop when suddenly there's a loud bang, all the lights go out, and we drop. We're all looking around like what's going on? Is this how we die? After a few minutes the lights come back on and the pilot comes in, the PA says sorry about that folks, but we were just struck by lightning. No need to worry, everything seems to be working, except for the radar. It's fried. I may have worried a little. Commercial pilot here. Not the most exciting story, but because there aren't any good ones yet I'll reply. I was flying myself and 3 passengers over the Appalachian Mountain on a clear day. We hit some mild turbulence and the door opened to the cabin. The passengers all started panicking, so I basically said chill out guys, this happens all the time, and tried closing the door. I couldn't get it shut while also flying the plane, so I simple landed at a nearby airfield and closed it on the ground. After the trip was over I told the passengers that was the first time that had ever happened to me, and I was slightly panicked as well. This was about 7 years ago now. I took my brother and two cousins up for a short sightseeing flight one morning in a Cessna 172. I knew there was some weather coming in, so I wanted to get it over with quickly. About 20 minutes in I noticed the clouds getting worse and then some lightning off in the distance. Definitely time to head back. Heading back I radioed my intentions. Uncontrolled airport but with an FBO, and someone radioed back with the current winds. It didn't compute what they said, and in retrospect I should have asked for clarification. Get back to the airport, and as I'm on final I realize just how bad the wind is. Having a hard time keeping on center line and eventually go around on the first try. By now I'm starting to sweating bullets, and planning on rerouting. If the next attempt doesn't go well, I make sure to turn the intercom off, so my cousins in the back can't hear how panicked I'm becoming, though I did keep my cool through the whole thing. On second attempt I've got the rudder pegged to the left and manage to get the wheels on the ground safely. I taxi to park, shut down, jump out, and start shaking with adrenaline and let out a huge sigh of relief. Cousins had no idea what just happened. It was just an exciting flight to them. My brother kind of knew what was going on, and I'll let him in on what I was thinking later. Apparently I had an audience of guys from the FBO watching me as well, probably yelling at me to go somewhere else. I'm honestly surprised sometimes I managed that landing with no incidents, especially since that was basically my first crosswind landing. If you enjoy these videos please consider subscribing.